And Tammy, I do have one question. Where is the retreat? Cottage Grove. Okay, good to know. So just checking, that's all. It's great to be here today. Welcome to Singing Hills, and we are continuing a series we started last Sunday on Easter. The series is This Changes Everything. So last week we talked about the resurrection of Jesus. And so today, part 2 is a 3-part series. Today, part 2 is If the Creation Story is True. And you have an opportunity to take some notes along with an outline there. But a group of scientists got together and told God, "We don't need you anymore." God said, "Oh, really? Why do you say that?" The scientists replied, "Well, we can create life on our own now." God said, "Is that right? Well, then be my guest. Give it a try." So the scientists started forming a pile of dirt. And God interrupted and said, "Whoa, not so fast there. Get your own dirt." Now, the discussion about creation versus evolution has been going on for some time now, and generally it's generated more heat than light. And there's no way I'm going to resolve the matter to everyone's satisfaction in 30 minutes or so. But if you'll have an open mind, I want to take a look at what both science and the Bible have to say on the subject. One writer puts it this way: as far as Christianity was concerned, the theory of evolution was catastrophic. The decline in religious belief can probably be attributed to the scientific and intellectual community advocating and propagating the Darwinian version of evolution more than any other single factor. And the textbook Evolutionary Biology declares Darwin made theological or spiritual explanations of the life processes unnecessary. In other words, evolution has put God out of a job. The origin of a species has trumped the Bible. And so let's begin by defining our terms. Everyone concedes that evolution is true to some extent, that biological change over time happens. That explains why there's more than 200 varieties of dogs. Now, this is called microevolution. But that's not the issue. The real issue is macroevolution, which is, here's the definition, change over time at or above the level of species. Darwin's theory goes much further than microevolution. He claimed that life began millions of years ago with a single simple cell creature and then developed through natural selection and random mutation and eventually evolved into humans. And so, in other words, evolution, not God, made us. Molecules to mankind. The philosophical underpinning of this is called naturalism. And here's the definition of naturalism: the doctrine that scientific laws are adequate to account for all phenomena. And so, I want you to listen carefully to this. This is what naturalism says. Nothing produces everything. Non-life produces life. Chance produces information. Chaos produces complexity. Non-reason produces reason. So that's where we're going to go today. Timothy Keller says this. He says, when evolution is turned into an all-encompassing theory explaining absolutely everything we believe, feel, and do as the product of natural selection, then we're not in the realm of science, but of philosophy. And I think that's exactly right. So, let's upgrade a little bit. Science in the past 30-plus years has made significant, huge discoveries in astronomy, biology, and psychology. And here's the bottom line of all three of these disciplines. Random mutation and natural selection cannot account for the complexity of things. So let's survey the conclusions from the past 30-plus years of scientific inquiry. First, the evidence of astronomy. And here we're talking about beginning with the Big Bang theory and Einstein's theory of general relativity. And they both point to a definite point of time of the beginning for the universe. See, the assumption ever since the Greeks was that the universe is eternal. Material world is eternal. Science has always assumed the eternality of the universe until just recently. Alan Sandage has been called the greatest observational cosmologist in the world. He's deciphered the secrets of the stars, of quasars, globular clusters, and he's quantified the universe's expansion through his work at Mount Wilson and Mount Palomar observatories. And at the age of 50, Alan Sandage decided to become a follower of Jesus. In his own words, he explained why. He says, "It was my science that drove me to the conclusion that the world is much more complicated than can be explained by science." And he said that the Big Bang was a supernatural event that cannot be explained within the realm of physics as we know it. The sudden emergence of matter, space, time, and energy pointed to the need for a transcendent God. And so scientists now conclude that the laws of nature do not explain the origin of the universe. The origin is expanding. The universe is expanding, no doubt about it. This is observable. And here's the deal. The speeds and the distances are so great that it will not come back together again and repeat the process. In other words, the universe had one beginning. It is not eternal. And this is a quote from Stephen Hawking. "Almost everyone in the scientific community believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang." And so the fact that most scientists now believe that the universe had a beginning is profoundly anti-materialistic. Even atheist Kai Nelson said this: "Suppose you suddenly hear a loud bang and you ask me, 'What made that bang?' And I reply, 'Nothing, it just happened.' You wouldn't accept that. And if a cause is needed for a small bang, then it's needed for the Big Bang as well." So this is an inescapable conclusion. It's a stunning confirmation of the creation story. It's actually very helpful for us as believers. Genesis 1:1, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." It points to a definite point in time. That's also, you've heard the joke, there's baseball in the Bible because it says "in the big inning," right? So I had to get that out of the way. Thank you for the sympathy laugh. I appreciate it. Stephen Meyer says this: "Taken together, the Big Bang and the theory of relativity provide a description of what Christians call creation out of nothing." Nobel Prize winner Arno Penzias said this about the Big Bang. He said, "The best data that we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the Bible." The universe had a beginning point. Christians have known this for more than 2,000 years, and scientists are just now catching up. And so I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the laws of physics. This is still under astronomy, but many scientists have changed their minds in the past 30 years, agreeing that the universe cannot reasonably be explained as a cosmic accident. Evidence for an intelligent designer becomes more compelling the more we understand about how carefully crafted our world is. Now, when scientists talk about fine-tuning the universe, they're referring to the amazing balancing of the fundamental laws of physics. And our minds really cannot wrap themselves around the precision of some of this. The result is a universe that has just the right conditions to sustain life. And the coincidences are simply too amazing to have been the result of happenstance. Over the past 30 years, scientists have discovered that just about everything about the basic structure of the universe is balanced on the razor's edge for life to exist. The dials are set too precisely to have been a random accident. So this is a photo of the Milky Way galaxy. Take a look at that. Now, scientists have developed what they call the galactic habitable zone. It's a zone in the galaxy where habitable planets might be possible. Life can't form everywhere. For example, it's not possible for life to be on a star, right? Our sun is a star. The possibility for any life to be on the sun is 0. Even if you have a sunblock factor of SPF 50,000, no life on the sun, right? So you can eliminate all stars. They're not suitable for life. Now, there are 3 kinds of galaxies. The Milky Way is a spiral galaxy. You can see why. It forms like a pinwheel. But a second kind, and the majority of galaxies are in the second category, called elliptical galaxies, which are egg-shaped. And then a third are irregular galaxies, which appear disorganized and distorted. And here's the deal. Neither elliptical galaxies or irregular galaxies are habitable for life. The orbits of the planets would take them into unsafe zones. So the inner region of the galaxy is much more dangerous because of radiation and other threats. The outer part of the galaxy isn't able to form Earth-like planets because of the lack of heavy elements. And so, for example, an eccentric orbit that a planet would have would cross it into dangerous territory. But being circular keeps it in a safe zone. So in terms of habitability, Earth is in the best possible place. Our location provides enough building blocks to yield life on Earth while providing a low level of threat to life. And scientists can't come up with an example of another place in the galaxy that is as friendly to life as our location. There is no better place, as far as we know, than where we are now. In other words, the universe was formed and tuned to make human life possible. And so we're going to get it, don't lose the forest for the trees. So take the expansion rate of the universe, which is fine-tuned to 1 part in a trillion. Now, if it were changed by 1 part in either direction, a little slower, a little faster, we wouldn't have a universe capable of supporting life. Physicist, philosopher Robin Collins says the same thing about gravity. Gravity is fine-tuned to 1 part in 100 million, billion. Perhaps you've heard of the cosmological constant. It represents the energy density of space. It is as precise as throwing a dart from space and hitting a bullseye just a trillionth of an inch in diameter on Earth, which is less than the size of an atom. And one expert said that there are more than 30 of these physical laws of astronomy, physical constants, that require precise calibration in order to produce a universe that can sustain life. Now again, mathematically, my brain explodes from that. I get it. Math is hard, right? Makes me think of the Jim Carrey movie Dumb and Dumber, where he's asking an attractive girl, he says, what are the chances of a guy like me ending up with a girl like you? Would it be 1 in 100? And she says, no, more like 1 in 1,000,000. And so he says, so you're saying there's a chance? That's kind of how it is, It requires more faith to believe in the laws of chance than it does to believe in the existence of a God. That's the mathematical truth. And so, just for example, one of these constants is the amount of background radiation. Just that one factor alone makes it highly unlikely that life exists anywhere else. And here's a quote. The coincidences that allow the fundamental properties of matter to yield a habitable environment are so improbable that they require a divine explanation. The evidence is so powerful that was instrumental in physicist Patrick Glenn, in abandoning his atheism. He says, today the concrete data points strongly in the direction of the God hypothesis. Psalm 19 verse 1 says this, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And see, all these things don't tell us whether God is personal or not, but it does help us to conclude that he does in fact exist and that he created the world. And therefore, the universe has a purpose. He made it very carefully and quite precisely as a habitation for intelligent life. And so, I'll talk about, focus, get a little bit smaller and just talk about planet Earth. The Earth's position in the universe and its intricately choreographed geological and chemical processes work together with exquisite symmetry to create a safe place for humans to live. Check out this picture, this photo of the Earth. Now, consider some of the things that make the Earth habitable. It can't be too close to the sun, or too much water evaporates in the atmosphere, causes a runaway greenhouse effect, and perhaps, this is what happened to the planet Venus. We get too far away and it gets too cold. Water and carbon dioxide freeze, and you have runaway glaciation, becomes an ice planet. See, Earth is at the primo location to balance carbon dioxide and oxygen, which mammals need. If the Earth's distance from the sun were moved by 5% in either direction, all animal life would cease. We just happen to be situated at the proper distance. In addition, we have a continuous circular orbit. Doesn't do any good to have a livable environment for just 4 months of the year. It has to be continuous, and a circular orbit makes that possible. Now, of course, key to our planet is the sun. Astronomer Guillermo Gonzalez said it would take a star with the highly unusual properties of our sun, the right mass, the right light, the right age, the right distance, the right orbit, the right galaxy, the right location, to nurture living organisms on an orbiting planet. A planet has to have a certain mass to retain an atmosphere. And you need an atmosphere for the free exchange of the chemicals of life and to protect inhabitants from cosmic radiation. You need an oxygen-rich atmosphere to support big-brained creatures like humans. Earth's atmosphere is 20% oxygen, which is just right, it turns out. The planet has to be kept a minimum size to keep the heat from its interior from being lost too quickly. See, if the Earth were smaller, just like Mars, which is not too much smaller than Earth, but it would cool down too quickly. In fact, Mars is cooled down and is basically considered dead. If Earth were more massive, it would have a higher surface gravity and less difference between the ocean basins and the mountains. In fact, if the Earth were completely smooth, it would be covered by water over its entirety for more than a mile deep. So, and then you talk about the moon. It's the right size and distance from us so that our rotation is just right. John O'Keefe put it this way. He said, if the solar system had not been made with the most exacting precision, we would have never come into existence. He once ran calculations estimating the likelihood of the right conditions for life existing elsewhere. And he concluded that if his assumptions were correct, then based on mathematical probabilities, only one planet is likely to bear intelligent life. And we know of one, planet Earth. But it's not certain there are many others, and perhaps there are no others. Psalm 102, verse 25. In the beginning, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. See, if God so precisely and carefully and amazingly constructed a mind-boggling habitat for his creatures, then it would be natural for him to want them to explore it, to treasure it, to investigate it, to be inspired by it, and ultimately, and most importantly, to find him through it, to worship the Creator and not the creation. Well, going to change gears a little bit and go to the evidence of biology. This one won't take quite as long. But even Darwin concluded that the lack of fossil evidence was the most serious objection to his theory, although he confidently predicted that future discoveries would vindicate him. So fast forward to the present. We have no lack of fossils. One scholar says we now have 250,000 fossil species, but the situation hasn't changed much. We have even fewer examples of evolutionary transition than we had during the time of Darwin. See, what the fossil record does show is that in rocks dated back some 570 million years, there's a sudden appearance of nearly all the animals, all animal phyla, and they appear fully formed, without a trace of the evolutionary ancestors that Darwinists require. And here's the quote. I want you to check out this quote. The Cambrian explosion, that's what it's called, is where a dazzling array of new life forms appears fully formed in the fossil record, without any ancestors. This is powerful evidence of a designer. Okay, so just for the sake of argument, let's assume that the time frame of what scientists tell us between 500 and 570 million years ago, virtually all the animal forms appear on the scene at once, and they're fully formed in all their primary characteristics. What does that tell you? See, the Cambrian explosion is called biology's Big Bang. Phyla are the highest category in the animal kingdom, and according to the experts, perhaps all phyla sprang forth during this time. And the sudden appearance of these radically new life forms without prior transitions has turned Darwin's tree of life on its head. The Cambrian explosion is inexplicable under Darwin's hypothesis, and that is a fatal shortcoming. Now, do you realize what that means? It means that creation didn't stop with the creation of the physical universe. It means that God intervened and he continued to create. He is the author of all life on earth. Genesis 1:21. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing with which the water teems, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. See, nobody disputes microevolution in the plant and animal world. Certainly, change over time has taken place. But the evidence is simply not there to draw the radical conclusion that large-scale macroevolutionary transitions have ever occurred. And so now we're going to get even smaller. Darwin was the first one to theorize that life emerged from chemicals reacting in some warm little pond. Dr. William Bradley, who wrote The Mystery of Life's Origin, said this. He said, Darwin underestimated the problem because it was widely thought back then that life just sort of develops naturally everywhere. People thought maggots would spontaneously generate from decaying meat, spontaneous generation. But then it was demonstrated that meat that was kept away from flies never developed maggots. In other words, spontaneous generation does not happen. And then Louis Pasteur showed that air contains microorganisms that can multiply in water, giving the illusion of spontaneous generation of life. But see, here's the issue. Darwin didn't think it'd be very difficult to create life from non-life because to him, the gap didn't seem to him to be very big. The truth is, though, that just a one-cell organism is more complicated than anything we've ever been able to recreate, even in a lab. Biochemist Michael Behe, in the book Darwin's Black Box, describes molecular machines that he calls are irreducibly complex. In other words, these complicated microscopic organisms, such as cilia and bacterial flagella, are impossible to have been built piece by piece through Darwinian processes because they have to be fully complete as they are in order to function. More than just a devastating challenge to Darwinism, these amazing biological systems, which far exceed the capacity of human technology, point towards a transcendent creator. Now I want to talk about the human genome for a minute. It comprises of 3 billion pairs of DNA, which make up around 20,000 unique genes across 46 chromosomes. And here's what goes in, again, just bear with me. It's what goes into the building of a living organism. Start with amino acids, and they come in 80 different types, but only 20 are found in living organisms. And so the trick is to isolate only the correct amino acids. And then the right amino acids have to be linked together in the right sequence in order to produce a protein molecule. And perhaps 100 amino acids have to be put together in the right manner to make a protein molecule. And that's just the first step. Creating a protein molecule doesn't mean that you've created life. Now bring together a collection of protein molecules, at least 200 of them with just the right functions to get a living cell. So that's the guidance that's needed to assemble everything that comes from DNA. So here's a picture of a double helix. Kind of looks like a ladder that's been twisted. And so here's the truth. Anytime we see written information, whether it's a painting on a cave or a novel from Amazon, there is intelligence behind that. And what is encoded in the DNA of every cell is information. Now, we use a 26-letter alphabet in English. Computer code is 2 characters. DNA language has 4 characters. Arranged in proper sequence, these comprise all the instructions needed to guide the functioning of a cell. And they spell out encoded instructions for how a cell makes protein. And here's the truth. Here's the complexity of it. Each cell, every cell of the human body contains more information than all 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's just in one cell. It's reasonable to make the inference that this is just not the random product of unguided nature. It's the unmistakable design of an intelligent designer. Every cell of every plant and animal has to have a DNA molecule. And you can think of it as a little microprocessor that regulates everything. So where did the DNA come from? The making of DNA is an even greater problem than creating protein. The bottom line is this: the origin of such a sophisticated system that is both rich in information and capable of reproducing itself has completely stymied origin of life scientists. As Nobel Prize winner Sir Francis Crick said this, check out this quote: "The origin of life appears to be almost a miracle. so many are the conditions which would have to be satisfied to get it going. And the mathematical odds of assembling a living organism are so astronomical that nobody still believes that random chance accounts for the origin of life. So listen to this carefully. If you took all the carbon in the universe and put it on the face of the earth, allowed it to chemically react at the most rapid rate possible, and left it for 1 billion years, the odds of creating just one protein molecule would be 1 chance with 60 zeros behind it. That makes winning the lottery look like a sure thing. Okay, by the way, my favorite definition of the lottery is a tax on people who are bad at math. So maybe you know. But Sir Frederick Hoyle put it this way: this scenario is about as likely as a tornado whirling through a junkyard and accidentally assembling a fully functioning Boeing 747. The information is the hallmark, it's the characteristic of mind. And from the evidence of genetics and biology, we can infer the existence of a mind that's far greater than ours. A conscious, purposeful, rational, intelligent designer who's also amazingly creative. See, the Creator is alive and well, thank you very much. There are too many powerful clues, especially in the astounding intricacy of unseen atoms and chemical language encoded on the double helix of the DNA. Well, one last, and this is going to get shorter and shorter, I promise. The evidence of psychology or human consciousness. Perhaps you've heard the joke of 3 engineers who are arguing about what kind of an engineer God must be when they looked at the human body. The first one says, well, God must be a mechanical engineer. Just look at the joints in the human body, how complex that is. The second says, God is an electrical engineer. Look at the nervous system and the complexity of that. The third says, God has to be a civil engineer. Who else would run a waste disposal pipeline through prime recreational real estate? Just saying. Think about it, you'll get it, start laughing. The evidence of psychology has to do with the complexity of human consciousness. Now, so consciousness is basically self-awareness. Many scientists are concluding that this is something the laws of chemistry and physics cannot explain. J.P. Moreland just says simply, you can't get something from nothing. Makes sense, right? If the universe began with dead matter with no consciousness, how then do you expect to get something totally different? Consciousness, living, thinking, feeling, believing creatures from materials that don't have that. But if everything started with the mind of God, we don't have a problem explaining the origin of our mind. Genesis 2 verse 7 says this, the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And Wilder Penfield is the author of modern neurosurgery. And he started out believing that consciousness came from neural activities in the brain, where synapses fire an astounding 10 million billion times a second. But after performing surgery on more than 1,000 patients with epilepsy, he encountered concrete evidence that the mind and the brain are actually distinct from each other, although they clearly intersect. And what that means is that science now believes in the existence of the soul. And here's the quote, current scientific findings support the view that the mind or the soul is not a separate entity apart from the brain and is not reducible to matter. You know, our soul is not material, but there's scientific evidence for it. It is not the same thing as the brain. You know, it intersects with the brain, but it's not the same scientifically. The philosopher René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And I think the scientific corollary to Descartes' famous statement is this, I think, therefore God is. See, that's the bottom line. See, at the end of the day, you either have in the beginning were the particles, or in the beginning was the logos, which means divine mind. Several years ago, Ben Stein made a movie called Expelled. It's a documentary about how intelligent design is not allowed to be taught in American colleges and universities. If a professor dares to teach that it's even a possibility, that professor typically gets fired. And so the subtitle to his movie Expelled is called No Intelligence Allowed. But toward the end of the movie, Ben Stein interviews Richard Dawkins, who wrote The God Delusion. Dawkins is strongly anti-Christian. And here, Richard Dawkins offers his explanation for how life began. Take a look at this.
In the book.
Well, then who did create the heavens and the earth?
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
And what was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe.
Well,
but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
So the
Ben Stein keeps pushing him, and finally Richard Dawkins, admits he thinks aliens started life. I mean, aliens, really? That's the best you can do scientifically? So William Provine at Cornell University said that if Darwinism is true, then there are 5 inescapable conclusions. There's no evidence for God. There's no foundation for right and wrong. There's no ultimate meaning or purpose in life. People don't have a free will, and there's no life after death. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. Biblical evidence. First of all, there is evidence for God. The evidence for an intelligent designer is credible, it is cogent, and it is compelling. And compelling is a higher level of proof than just convincing. These findings from astronomy and physics alone are sufficient to support the design hypothesis, but the evidence from biology and psychology build an even more powerful case that is far superior than any other explanation, and that includes aliens. Deuteronomy 4, verse 35. You were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Beside him there is no other. Well, secondly, there's a foundation for right and wrong, and this is often the real issue. Lee Strobel writes this, and he wrote the case for a creator. He said, I had a lot of motivation to stay on the path of atheism. I didn't want there to be a God who would hold me responsible for my immoral lifestyle. See, that's often the real issue. We don't want to be held accountable as human beings for our behavior. And so sometimes it's safer to postulate Darwinian evolution. Romans 1, verse 20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Well, then, thirdly, there is purpose in life, and this is good news. If the universe is just a result of a random assortment of matter, then there is no meaning or purpose in life. We have to try to create it at the moment. But if the universe is the result of intelligent design, then meaning or purpose is inherent to it. Colossians 1, verse 16 in the Message, for everything, absolutely everything, above and below, visible and invisible, everything got started in him and finds its purpose in him. Fourthly, people have a free will. If we're just highly conditioned, complex organisms, then we react to stimuli, but we don't really have any free will. Our choices are predetermined by what we've been conditioned with. But see, there is so much more to life than just matter. Science cannot explain how life came from non-life. Science cannot explain how conscious awareness springs from organic life, why a group of atoms would ever be able to think and have self-awareness. See, God is spirit. He transcends matter. He is invisible. The Bible says that God is love. Love is a relational word. Definitional to love is free will or choice. There's no such thing as coerced love. That's an oxymoron. Joshua 24, verse 15 says, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And then there is life after death. See, we're not composed only of matter. We have a capacity for self-reflection, for art, for language, for creativity. Science cannot account for consciousness from the interaction of physical matter in the brain. We're made in the image of God, and we have a soul that transcends death. Isaiah 25, verse 8 says, "He will swallow up death forever." See, and in the Bible, and we talked about this last Sunday on Easter, we have confirmation that Jesus was put to death and was last seen alive by credible witnesses. This provides powerful testimony that it's possible to survive death outside our physical body. See, the laws of probability work against the idea that the universe was brought about by chance. So, for example, let's say that I'm hiking on Mount Hood because my wife and I, she loves to hike. That's her love language. And so we come across rocks that spell out, "Welcome to Mount Hood, Greg Strandigan. P.S. I love you." So there's these rocks on the side of the mountain that spell that out. "Welcome to Mount Hood, Greg Strandigan. P.S. I love you." Now, how did the rocks get that way? One hypothesis could be, well, the rocks just happen to be arranged in that configuration, maybe due to an earthquake or a rock slide. Now, you couldn't, I'm saying there's a chance, right? You can't totally rule it out. It could happen, I suppose. But a better explanation is that my wife, who loves to hike, was visiting the mountain ahead of time and arranged the rocks that way. Now, would you accept the wife theory over the chance theory? Yeah, exactly. Why? Because it strikes us as supremely improbable that the rocks would be arranged that way by chance, but not so improbable that my lovely bride would arrange them in that pattern. And likewise, it's supremely improbable that the universe could have come about as by random chance. But it's not at all improbable if it were the work of an intelligent designer. I like the story of a young man who was searching for truth, and he came upon an old priest. And he said, "Father, I cannot see God." And the priest said this, "Young man, my problem is completely different. I cannot not see him." Jeremiah 29, verse 13 says this, "You'll seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." And so my encouragement to you is find God. What could be more important in life than finding God? Don't settle for anything less until you have found him. Don't miss the purpose for why you were created. And see, the creation story isn't just to provide evidence so that we'll believe. I think the real purpose is to lead us to worship, to reflect on the awesomeness, the wonder, the majesty of God, to look at the stars in the night sky, to reflect upon the DNA molecule. Those are occasions to worship the Creator who brought them into existence. See, in the creation of the vastness of the universe, the complexity of DNA, all that, we see the hand of God. It's unmistakable. He is saying, "Welcome to the universe." And in the cross of Jesus, we see not only God's majesty and his power, but we also see his love and how he's personally desires relationship for us. Jesus says, "P.S. in the cross, I love you." Let's pray. God, I thank you for just the evidence that we have, and it's beyond even our ability to comprehend. So I pray that we can soak that in with the assurance that, God, you are there, that you have created everything. It's way beyond what we can explain by any kind of scientific means. And we humbly acknowledge that you are the Creator and you are worthy of worship. So, God, I thank you that you're not only majestic and powerful, but that you are personal and that you love us through Jesus. And we know more about We do know some of your attributes through creation, but we even know more through Jesus and what he came to do and make us right with you. And so, God, we say thank you for all of that. Let us worship you in spirit and in truth. In Christ's name, amen. We're going to close out with a song of worship acknowledging that God is worthy of our praise.